Hey, it is 5:30 and it is time for Happy Hour with Dr. Lisa. That's me. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it and I am so happy to talk to you all today about my blog 35, another addition to October Ghost Stories. So this time I wanted to focus on haunted houses, which is an interesting topic. Always interesting to talk about haunted houses. But before we get into it, I want to make sure you know how to reach me. You can reach me via phone, 765-205-1959. You can also reach me via email, which is kidscanseeghosts@gmail.com. You can also send me a DM on Instagram at kidscanseeghosts. Can you? I also have a Facebook page, Twitter, Quora. I'm just kind of all over social media. So I'd love for you to chat with me. Thank you to those of you who have been chatting with me, including children. You know, I love the babies. And so there have been lots and lots of babies talking to me about some of their experiences. And the cool thing about a lot of these kids that I'm meeting is that they are more than willing to share their stories with all of you through me, because I told them I have to keep them confidential. So they are telling me all kinds of stuff. And I have been testing out their stories too, in some of the ways that I've shared with all of you that I test them out. So TBA on that one. One of them told me today that I need to wait to talk about it because there's more that needs to be said. Some of them want to draw me pictures and really want to tell their stories to me. So I'm looking forward to writing those things up on my blog. So I also told them if they wanted to call in, they could, but they can't tell their names and they definitely need to talk to their parents about that first. So TBA, we'll see what happens, but lots of stories. And speaking of one story, one told me a story about a haunted house. And thought to myself, that's a really good story to talk about today. But it's not done yet. So as soon as I have all of the information, I will share it with all of you. So what's really interesting is that I have not, full disclosure, I have not actually talked to a kid that can see ghosts. I kid you not. Where are we? 2022? Probably in over uh it might be 10 years. Because remember, a lot of my stories happened early in my career in psychology and continued as I aged in psychology and matured and grew in psychology. But I haven't really spent time with kids that can see ghosts in quite a while, to the point where they were, if they did see ghosts, they were comfortable enough to tell me. Because remember, it's something that I don't come out and ask them directly. Older kids, sometimes you can, but typically they'll just come out and talk to me. And one of them actually explained to me why. So I'm going to write all that in the blog as well. So the fact that I am doing this podcast, but also writing these stories up on my website, these kids were unaware that I was doing this stuff. You might find that hard to believe because everybody is on social media and everybody has Google, but this is the thing. When you're a new person to kids, they don't always remember your name. And they definitely, if they have not Googled you, they don't know a lot about you. So I'm kind of a stranger to kids that I'm meeting now. And then I tell them and they're like, oh, so I just told you that about me and you're actually writing about it. Now, how many kids are going to meet somebody who tells them, well, I actually write about the ghost stories of children that have been under my care? Not a lot of people. So not only am I surprised, but these babies are surprised too. They're kind of like, oh, wow. So this really is a comforting spot to share my stories. And I'm like, well, yeah. And if you're not comfortable with me, talking about your stories, because I keep things very confidential and they know that about me because we've talked about it, then I don't have to tell it. And they're like, no, 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 no. If you're doing it on behalf of children, I want to tell you. I want to tell you my story. And so there have been a couple of other people who have shared their stories. One of them wrote their story out for me. So I'll be posting that to my blog maybe Friday. So you guys continue to read the website. I appreciate it. Thank you. And continue to listen because I have more stories. And by the way, I haven't even finished my own stories about the kids from the past yet. So these are all new stories. Pretty cool. But if you would like to join me on Podbean, make sure you know that you can. Sometimes, people will jump on and talk to me live about their stories as well or their experiences. And I welcome that from all of you. All right, let's get started about haunted houses. That was blog 35. So this is the thing. Sometimes something will ignite a memory, and that happens to all of us. And so there are times when I'll be doing things, even with my own kids, and I'll go, wait a minute, I remember a kid told me about that. Now, what did they say? And I have to sit and think about it. And if I can remember it, but I can't remember all the details, very rarely have I gone back to my notes. But if it's something really good, I can always go back to a previous evaluation and then it'll click like, oh, okay. They told me what was out the window because XYZ. That's the piece sometimes that's missing that I'll remember. Like I remembered some stories that kids told me about their own houses, which is what I was thinking about when I wrote this blog called Haunted Houses, but I cannot remember the exact story. So I actually went back and kind of glanced at a couple of things and I thought, oh, okay. Now it's clicking. Now I remember. Oh, yeah, I got to share this with the public. So that's kind of what prompted me back in October to write about haunted houses. Besides that, a lot of people like to visit haunted houses, which I actually think is pretty cool. And people always want to know little things from me, like, would I visit a haunted house? And the answer is yes. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. And yeah, that stuff doesn't scare me too much. Now, if Jason jumps out, Jason meaning Jason, Freddy Krueger, from the movies, then yeah, I'm scared of Jason, but that's a different story. So one of the things that I like to do for Halloween is to watch Monster House. And this year when I was watching Monster House, there was something triggered in me. And it's funny, Monster House is a film that was produced by Jack Rapke and Steve Starkley for Columbia Pictures. And I actually love that little movie. I do. So I watch it yearly for Halloween. And last year was the first Halloween that one of my kids actually watched it because there was always this fear factor of watching that movie. And if you think about it, it's pretty dark, even though there are kids in it. So can you blame a little kid for being kind of scared to watch Monster House? I don't think so. But last year, one of my kids was really brave and said, I'm going to watch this with you. Now, in the beginning, the eyes were closed and all that, but that's another story. So we worked our way through it. And so I started thinking about some of the stories that Nebulous Children have told me about their own houses. And I got to thinking, about all of our houses, including some of my stories in real estate. And I was like, are all of our houses haunted? That was a question that I had. Do we all have activity? Some of us we're aware of and we can see, and the rest of us, we're kind of blind to it, or the veil is over our eyes and we can't see it. When I talk to Nebulous kids, they say, yes, everybody has spirits in their home. Everybody. Most of you can't see it, but if you can see what we see, and we see ghosts everywhere, including our houses and including yours. Some of the kids would tell me that they were over their friends' houses, and at their friends' houses, there would just be a ghost that would just walk past. Like if they had a sleepover and went to the bathroom, there'd just be one standing in the hallway or, in the kitchen. So I've heard over the years lots of stories from kids about that. And one of the factors that the kids would talk to me about is that there is a spiritual realm. And that is why there are spirits around us. The way that they explained it to me was if you're just looking like around the room, you can't see a ghost, Dr. Lisa. But when I look around the room, that's all I see. Unless I tell them to get away or go away, and then they go away. And a little girl explained this to me just last week, about how even being in the school, that looking down the hallway at a school, like from her viewpoint or her vantage point, she sees ghosts down the hallway. And she says sometimes they are, very dark, and sometimes they're not. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So what if your house is haunted? Halloween is a time of year when we do want to visit haunted houses. There's a couple of places that are very popular when I was in St. Louis for people to visit. They visit all times of the year, but they definitely would visit around Halloween. And I was supposed to go to one of those houses and didn't go. Although I'm not very afraid of this stuff, there are some things that I just don't mess with. And I have to share with you, there are people that don't mess with dark things, right? They'll be like, okay, I'm going to go visit this house. It's known for, its activity. It's known for its, demonic activity, things like that. Those are things that I don't get into. That's too real to me. Okay. And these kids will tell me stuff like, yeah, it's very real. Don't go. However, the pretend haunted houses that have people jumping out at you and stuff like that, they're like, yeah, that's just goofy. That's not really how it goes, but it's just fun for people. So they're like, yeah, every house has, activity. And so there is when it's just talking about a spiritual realm, I've had adults who can see ghosts and adults who who cannot see ghosts, who would say there's a spiritual realm. The Bible talks about a spiritual realm. There are spirits all around us. And so kids say that is true, but you don't want to see them. I mean, in their opinion, it's like, well, part of the reason we're sitting here is because of the fact that we can see ghosts. We just don't know how to, some of the kids, the younger kids obviously couldn't express that. Sometimes it makes them sad because sometimes they're scared. I just had a little boy tell me last week he won't go in a certain part of his house, period, because he saw a ghost in one part of the house. And it was scary. He said, it scared me. I don't go in that part of the house anymore. So when I asked the question, well, how can you tell your house is haunted? Nebulous kids will say, obviously, because we can see them. So we know. The cool thing about the kids that I've been meeting lately, their parents are very supportive. And so a lot of their parents believe what they're telling them. So these kids are saying, yeah, my house is haunted. Your house is too. Everybody's house is haunted, but you can control what actually comes into your home. And I'm like, boy, oh boy, oh boy. if a lot of people think if you buy an older house, because a lot of the kids actually talk about older houses too. They say, oh, my house is really old. That's why there are ghosts in there, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but if there's a spiritual realm, it doesn't matter how old your house is. And I got corrected on that last week. There was a child who told me that's incorrect. Old houses have history. Some of the older houses are built on top of things they shouldn't have been built on. And I'm like, hey, you got a point there, keep talking, keep correcting me because I don't mind that. And they're like, no, you know, newer houses are not as scary as the older ones. The older ones have a lot of history. You'll be surprised at how many houses have been built onto cemeteries and things that are scary to most of us, like burial grounds and things like that. So they were like, sometimes when we see things and they're dark angels, they're like, yeah, they look like dark angels. The disturbances can be different. They're very different than a haunted house where people are jumping out at you. These can be frightening because they look clear. They're ghosts. You can see through them. And I'm like, this is just fascinating. So sometimes they were telling me what they actually see in their house is so terrifying that they refuse. They absolutely refuse to go in the basement, for example, or they refuse to go into, the attic, or, after they see a ghost in the yard, they won't go into the backyard. Yeah. So lots of disturbances. Nebulous children do experience them in their homes. So to them, think about twin flames. Remember child G and child F, twin flames? They definitely saw dark angels in their house. So that was pretty much that blog about haunted houses. It gets really deep too. Just to give you a little summary, because if you actually talk to one of these kids that see ghosts about their own house, sometimes it even frightens their parents, because then their parents can't see. And then they go home and they're like, well, shoot, I need to get my holy water and my oil, and I need to get my Bibles, and I need to put them out. And I got to do something because now I'm scared and now my kid is scared. So those are the differences that the kids have shared with me between, haunted houses versus haunted houses that have, Chucky in them. And so speaking of Chucky, something came up last week. And it was interesting and unnerving, if you will. I think that's the right word to describe it. Somebody brought up dolls. And I said, you know what? I wrote a blog about dolls, and I'm actually going to talk about it on my next podcast, because I touched upon haunted houses last week. I wanted to finish it up today and then go right into haunted dolls. And this person says something that I commonly hear about dolls, that there was a purchase of a doll. And this is a kid who can see ghosts, and the doll was so scary to her, excuse me, that she, her mother eventually got rid of the doll. And she said the doll was haunted. She said that doll was haunted. I told my mother, different things like not being able to sleep, these things you see in the movie. And I was kind of like, wow, because this is not the first time that I heard about dolls. When I look back to history, I mean, I even had a kid hand me a stuffed animal that I talked about once on my blog and said, an angel told me to give you this and that you are supposed to keep it. And I told you guys I still have the little bear. So when I think about some of these movies that had dolls, remember Chucky? Chucky came out back in 1988. So I was still in high school back then. But I remember Chucky, and that movie was a box office success. Very successful movie. But dolls are something else. I remember somebody very close to me before we talk about Chucky. Did I talk about this in the blog before I jump ahead of myself? I don't think I did. Let me look real quick. Okay, no, I didn't. I walked into somebody's house, a relative of mine, and I do have issues with buying dolls from other countries. I've only bought this, and I don't say that disrespectfully. I say it because it's just truly how I feel. So I bought this doll once, and it's the only doll that I bought that was from another country. But when I say that, I'm not going to say this country where I was skeptical, but when I walked into the house of this person and saw maybe 4 of these dolls, I kid you not, I stood there and looked at them. They gave me the creeps. I had chills going up my arms, and I turned to that person and I said, "Where did you get these dolls?" And the person told me, and I said, "You have to get rid of them." I don't know what kind of feeling it was that I had or why this was so anxiety provoking, if you will. But I said, you have to get rid of those dolls. Those dolls are no good. They even look like little demons, if I can describe them to you. So this person was like, oh, they're just some dolls, blah, 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 blah. A couple weeks later, I went over to that person's house to visit and said, where are all your dolls? Well, I had to get rid of them. Well, why did you get rid of them? Because everybody that came over here told me to get rid of them because they gave them the chills. I said, these things may have been climbing on you at night and trying to do some type of magic stuff. I mean, I was making a joke about it, but I said, good, you should have gotten rid of them if everybody was telling you something was up with those dolls. I believe that stuff. I mean, yeah, I've heard some stories about dolls too. So when we think about growing up and playing with dolls, I had a friend, rest in peace to her. Her name was Maria. We used to play with dolls for hours. So I would go to her house, she would go to mine, come to mine, and we were all about Barbie dolls and other dolls, and I would collect dolls. My mother actually kept a lot of my Barbie dolls. I probably had a child that was almost grown by the time, we got rid of all those Barbie dolls. I had the original Barbie house and Barbie van and all that stuff. Don't let them tell you, ladies, if you're buying dolls, Barbie dolls, that the original van was purple and pink, because it was not. It was that ugly 70s yellow. Sidebar. The museum in Indianapolis, the Children's Museum, had that wrong. And I told them they had the purple and pink van out there saying that was the original van. And I said, no, it's not. And showed them a picture, the curator. So when you're little, you would think, okay, what would happen if I go to sleep? It was one point when I was little where I used to think all of these dolls and stuffed animals are going to come to life. And of course, later on, we had the movie Toy Story. So over time, my imagination got the best of me about these dolls for some reason when I was little, and I would have my mom, store all those dolls in the attic. I had a bunch of them, and I just could not look them in the face. I mean, don't dolls look scary sometimes? Especially the ones that are like babies when the eyes blink and they follow you. And they follow you around. Yeah, so I was just over it. So all the dolls went upstairs. Then Child's Play came out. Excuse me. And back then it was only confirmation bias for me. I was like, see, all these dolls come to life at night. Oh my God, Chucky was terrible. It was horrible. I was like, lock those dolls up. I never want to see those dolls again. And I did. But when years later, when I heard so many stories from kids about, different dolls, including, dolls that we had, for example, in building 2, kids would still tell me about those dolls that we had in building 2. And I'm like, can dolls really be haunted? And I kid you not, the kids would say, yes, a spirit can jump. Whether or not dolls can actually be possessed has been a discussion for many years. Now, nebulous children tell me, oh, yes, like the child that I just talked about who decided that she could not have that doll. She felt like there was something in the doll and it kept looking at her, right? This is a child who believed that a dark angel was in this doll. So be careful with regard to what you bring into your house. Like when you travel, don't be so quick to bring home dolls, especially if they tell you this doll has been blessed with this. Well, you don't know what they're blessing these dolls with and what you're bringing into your house or what type of rituals are practiced or who presides over the customs. I mean, that's what happened to the person whose house I went into. These dolls had been, I don't know, sacred and quote unquote blessed by something. So that's why you want to be careful about with what you bring into your house. And so, I wouldn't even let my daughter go near those statues, just saying, burn them and all that stuff. It wasn't a joke to me. And then years later is when I started to learn. I did write about this in the blog. I started to learn, from kids that some of that energy that I had was actually valid. And remember, I can't see ghosts. Sometimes I can feel energy like that, and I just didn't feel good about that stuff. So, do you ever get the feeling like when you walk into a house, like, have you ever watched something? What was I watching on TV? A series on Netflix, and I could see the whole visual. Oh, this movie with Christina Milian, and it's a cute movie. Falling in Love. It's one of my favorite little movies to watch. And she's so cute in it. One of the ladies that owns a bed and breakfast just loves dolls. And then I was looking at it, I was like, how does it feel to just walk into a whole house that's just, some people are just obsessed, collecting dolls. And oh my God, that's so creepy to me just to see a bunch of eyes staring at me like that. I mean, everybody's not as goofy as I am, but I don't know. Think about a bunch of mannequins too. Would you want to be in a room with a bunch of mannequins? Not me. You walk into a department store at night and you see a bunch of mannequins. I'm like, okay, they're just gonna start walking and talking to me. With those frozen stares, and when they stare at you with that frozen stare, I'm like, is it looking at me? Have you guys? You ever walked in front of a mannequin and just stood there to see if the eyes follow you? Like if you move in one direction, doesn't it seem like the eyes follow you? It does to me. And so sometimes, you can understand why if you think as a child, why some dolls and mannequins and why they can be scary to nebulous children. And I have to tell you, a lot of the nebulous children that I worked with, including the one last week, they refuse to have dolls. Refuse. Flat out, no. Get rid of the dolls. They don't want anything to do with dolls. But dolls can be very beautiful. Excuse me. I have 4 little dolls sitting here right now. They are very pretty. One of my colleagues gave them to me because I have daughters, and they're all Asian American dolls, and they're very pretty. So, dolls also, I don't want to give them a bad rap, but when we're talking about nebulous children, a lot of them don't mess with dolls. But dolls, on the other hand, can be very beautiful. Like these 4 Asian American dolls that I have in front of me, they're very beautiful. But let me tell you something that I learned, because sometimes when I write these blogs, I actually learn some stuff. Because if I don't know a whole lot about things that Nebulous Children talk about, then I'll go study it, right? And so I actually, when I was writing this blog, I looked up haunted dolls, and oh my God, it's actually a thing. Did you all know that? It is a thing. It is a thing to buy haunted dolls. So, if you don't believe me, Google it. If you get bored, look up haunted, like purchasing haunted dolls. You can even buy them on Amazon. I was like, what? Why would anybody want to buy a haunted doll? Were they perceived as a haunted doll? And some of them are very beautiful too, and they're in cases. There's a haunted doll museum. I was like, telling my husband, there's a whole market for haunted dolls? Really? So my Nebulous kids weren't the only ones who thought that some dolls could be haunted. Absolutely not, right? There's a whole market for it. I thought that was very, very interesting. When it comes down to whether or not these dolls are actually haunted when individuals purchase it, Nebulous Kid, because I recently asked too, what Nebulous Kids tell me is that it just depends on whether or not the ghost, and when I say ghosts to these kids, they're talking about dark angels. So let me be clear about that. Dark angels decide to hide near the doll, making it move. Near the doll. I said, ooh, this is deep. So listen, when I was in building 2, Nebulous Children would see the ghosts activating the toys. And it was all of them. Remember, they would go into a waiting room that had a bunch of toys in it. And so Nebulous Children would see ghosts near some of the toys, activating the toys. That was incredibly scary to me. I told you guys, especially when the toys would go off on their own, like several toys, not just the fire truck. Yeah. They would tell me, for example, there was I'll just use the little spirit boy for an example. If you read the blogs, you know who the little spirit boy is. Little spirit boy will sit by the toys and activate them. So they're not always quote unquote possessed, but it can be a ghost who will sit next to it and just activate it, turn them on, or make the doll's arms move, or, make the eyes move. They always would tell me, when you see that stuff in movies, for example, the eyes moving in a doll, that's the ghost moving the eyes, stuff like that. And I was like, whoa, I can't imagine being a Nebulous child and seeing these things. But that was the reason why the kid from last week just didn't want the doll. I just don't want to deal with the doll. They start messing with the dolls and stuff like that. And for me, just get rid of it. And I'm like, this is so fascinating. So, not to spook you out about dolls, but it was Halloween when I told the story, so it fit the mood at the time. Okay, some of you have memories of hearing stuff about haunted dolls. There have been a couple of you when I wrote this blog who said, yeah, I heard that dolls can be haunted too. I'll tell you something that I didn't expect when I started learning this stuff from the kids is that this is a little off to me, but it used to happen. There were parents sometimes. Let's see, could they see ghosts or not? Yes, because I'm picturing one parent. No. I'm gonna say no, because this parent I'm now thinking about could not see ghosts. But when the kids would say, yeah, there's a ghost either next to the toy or making the doll move and stuff like that. There are parents who actually take the toy and embrace it in hopes that, ghosts will react to them so that they can see it. But a lot of the kids would tell me that they won't even react when the parents want them to do that because a lot of them were afraid of the parents. You know how I wrote one blog about a father who said they better not come back and, daddy will XYZ to the ghost, and they didn't. That's what I'm talking about. They get afraid. And so the kids would say, no, you know, um, they are not going to talk when you want them to talk like that. And, if these were parents who couldn't see ghosts, parents who could see ghosts could see the whole thing, obviously. So they are sometimes some of the parents that I've worked with were willing to embrace this more if it wasn't as real to them. So, for example, there were some dolls that resembled Annabelle. Do you remember Annabelle from The Conjuring? Yeah. That's one movie that I cannot watch again, just so you know. It was just too real for me. Anything that's real, I just I hear too many stories and stay away from it. The doll, however, if you think about it, is very popular looking, blonde hair, blue eyes, pretty dress on, stuff like that. And so that doll actually represented very well, just like Chucky, how it I'm not going to say tortures kids in reality, nebulous kids, but they can see all of this stuff. So if you can't see ghosts, I almost want you to think about Annabelle, but not in such a negative way or in such an evil way. Just kind of think about how you would feel. And so you wouldn't want that kind of doll around either. And that's kind of how the kid felt last week. Like, no, I got to get rid of this doll. I can't have this doll around me. The individuals that actually, so I don't know how, let me just sidebar for a second. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but that story is actually true about Annabelle. You should read my blog because I talk about it. The Warrens, they were a couple back when I was younger who used to work with individuals who believed that their houses were haunted. And this is where The Conjuring with Annabelle was loosely based off of their experience. And they actually kept that doll. I think it's in their, if they have a museum, and if you know more than me, just correct me. I don't mind that. I don't remember their story wholeheartedly, but they actually had it. I think they're both deceased now within their possession. They also worked on Amityville Horror and Poltergeist. So a lot of these came out. Poltergeist definitely came out when I was a little kid, and it scared the heebie-jeebies out of me when I was a kid. And then Amityville Horror. So I do have a real quick story about Amityville. I have a friend who's actually from Amityville, Long Island. And when I first met her, I said, is this real? Is the Amityville Horror House real? And she said, yep. And we wouldn't go near it when we were kids. The media tried to say that it was not real. And she said it actually was real. And I was like, whoa, wow. I wonder if she remembers that story. I have to remind her today. But yep. And then with Poltergeist, some of you may not know, some of you might be a little younger, but after that movie came out, there were some cast members who had passed away. And I remember the mother in that movie because I had a relative who lived down the street from the mother, and she died. The little girl from there died. So those are movies that I declined to watch during Halloween. But the Warrens actually worked with the families from all those homes. And the original family that owned the Annabelle doll, that was from the 70s. And that's when the alleged possession started with the purchase of that doll. Purchase of that doll. Yeah. So listen, I purchased lots of dolls. The interesting thing about my girls is that one picked up a basketball and the other one was just too social and just had zero time to play with dolls. So my girls didn't play with dolls for a long time. I played with dolls a lot longer than my girls. But listen, you can purchase a doll. Just don't get a porcelain one. And statues from strange places. I'm kind of kidding, but I'm kind of not. Don't judge me. um, you have to be very cognizant of what you're doing, though. Like, seriously, I laugh a lot and play a lot and make a lot of jokes and all that stuff. But let me tell you something. Just to be very honest with you, there are, like, one day when I'm a grandma and I have daughters, let me tell you, there are certain dolls that I'm just not purchasing for my granddaughters at all. Period, point blank. I know too much. I've seen too much. Heck, I just heard a story last week. So I am definitely one who will probably stay away from purchasing my future granddaughters, certain dolls. I don't want those dolls watching me, and I don't want them watching my granddaughters when they go to sleep. So I think talking about, dolls was an interesting story to do for Halloween, and I hope you've kind of liked it. Oh, one thing I just read in a blog I forgot to tell you. Listen, my daughter, when I brought that doll back, remember I mentioned that earlier in the blog that I bought a doll from another country. I forgot about that. My daughter wouldn't play with it at all. I still have it because I was like, I'm not throwing this doll away. It's a doll from another country, and I'll probably never go back to that country again, although I really liked it. I'm just not going to give it away. Well, she never did play with it. Things that make you go, Will you still purchase dolls? That's my question to you. All righty. Now, here's the thing. Next week, we're going to talk about church ghosts. My stories are completely true. Every last one of them. I am going to talk to you in detail about church ghosts next week. I have a lot to talk about there with examples for just about everything that I'm going to tell you about. And it's actually a longer blog because it was a time when I learned a whole lot. This was probably when I had a change. I had a full change with regard to understanding dark angels better in correlation with God. And next week, I'm going to tell you what prompted that revelation. No pun intended, but I do like revelations. And why. It's it was a good lesson for me. And I'm hoping that you read the blog and you can talk about it with me next week. It was a real pivotal point in my career too. And I think when I look back, it really helped me navigate my way to being comfortable with talking about both demons and God. A lot of people don't want to talk about demons. A lot of people are scared to even say the word demon. A lot of people believe that you shouldn't talk about demons. So one of the things that, now I definitely don't like to give demons light. There's nothing light. And that is a pun about demons. But if you believe in God, you do believe in demons. And it's all right to start talking about them to educate other people. And that's what happened to me, which is why I wrote it, because I had a live experience with a pastor about church ghosts. So tune in next week and we're going to talk about it. If you guys have any questions, make sure you call me. I want this to be a fun podcast, not one that's so deep in psychology to where we just can't shoot the breeze about this stuff, because they're actually really fun stories. So tune in for next week. Thank you so much for joining me. You guys have a wonderful up and coming weekend. Bye-bye.